Sirsasana, aka headstand. So there's a lot of ideas around this, both in how the pose should be done correctly, safely, effectively, and also whether we should put it into classes and teach it in a group setting. So in my experience, it is much better done as a one-on-one type situation. So if you're doing a one-on-one with a student, you can start to refine it, so you can set it up safely, making sure you're watching what they're doing and assist them, or in a workshop situation. So either way, unless you're doing it in quite an advanced class where students can do it safely, they have walls to back them up, or if you clearly state that if they're not practiced in it to give them other variations of what to do, then I would definitely, especially in a workshop setting, pair people up either in groups of 2 or 3. Because the main thing that you want to do is, one, people might need support coming up and down, but also to make sure that they obviously don't topple over. So we'll go through a few different things and pieces of it. So one important piece, which I don't see instructed a lot, is finding the right alignment of the elbows underneath the shoulders. Because too close in, we're going to hunch up the shoulders and restrict it, and then too far out, and we're actually using a lot of our force just to keep our elbows from both sliding out too far out or in. So I find, as a general guide, not a rule, but placing your fingers and wrapping them around your elbows and then keeping that distance apart when you place the hands back down would be more or less ideal for most people. So you can start off by setting yourself up down on the knees, taking your hands and wrapping them around the elbows, placing the elbows down, and then keeping the elbows where they are, and then you can interlace the fingers. So some people prefer to have the pinky finger, if you can see, just wrap normally. But what you can do is tuck that bottom pinky finger, whichever the bottom one is, underneath, so it disappears, and then you're not putting pressure on that pinky finger. So it can take a little bit of the stability away, but it will definitely protect that pinky finger. And again, it's just something that you can experiment with. Some say that you should have the wrists together. Some say that you should have apart. Again, it's something that you can find your own preference with. I prefer to have apart because it's important to get the back of the head. So we want the top back half of the head into the palms, and then maybe even rolling the palms face up a little bit so we can get a little bit more support for the upper back of our head. We then just gently start to straighten the legs and pull the shoulders up above the head. So we want to walk the feet as close to the body as we can. Now, as an instructor, you want to support by having one leg in a low lunge position in front of the person so that they're not going to topple over, and then have your hand here so you can support their sacrum and their hips, but also not directly in front, so you cop a foot to the head. So you can place your fingers around their hips and then just gently support them up. So if they need to kick off, they can, but if they can use a little bit of activation, and then heels to the ceiling. So heel straight up to the ceiling. Good. You can imagine that you're looking at your feet. So obviously you can't actually do that, but imagine you're looking at the feet. So that way the belly will curl in a little bit more. Thank you. So if you're right to do one more, I'll get you to do one facing this way. Yep. Just I'll give you a moment. So one thing we want to avoid is back bending too much. So if you are doing it in a class setting or a workshop setting, I would definitely recommend doing a lot of core activation before we come into a headstand. So obviously we don't sequence a headstand as a flow, but what you can think about is what do we need to avoid and what do we need to activate in order to make a good, safe headstand. So obviously we want to get a lot of shoulder activation, so doing some dolphins or something before it, and then also making sure that we're not doing too much back bends in the flow and a lot of core activation. So when we do lift our feet up, we don't lift them up like that, we lift them straight up. So when we are starting to come up, we want to draw the lower belly in. And just because our head is on the ground, obviously we can't look at our feet, but we want to imagine that we're looking down at our feet so that when our gaze goes down, and you can even try this at home. So if you stand up straight and then just think about looking at your feet and just look down with your eyes and then do your best to look at your feet. And then eventually everything will start to line up, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking at that for that what we call the hollow body shape. We don't want to have too much back bend. And the last piece is the more that you bring the hips over the shoulders, the easier the whole transition in and out will be, because we're pouring our weight and using that weight distribution to bring it up, so we don't have to put too much pressure on the lower back. The only other piece of that is the more that the shoulders are over the head, sorry, the hips are over the shoulders, the more it might feel like you're about to tip over, so then the person might panic out. So you just want to say that if they do feel like they're going to topple over, you've got them, you're there, and not to panic, to slow down the breath, and not to let go of your position, because then they can fall on their head. Because that's one contraindication or thing, something that you want to watch, is that if someone is worried about falling and then they take their hands off the ground, all the pressure goes onto the head. Yeah, so just make sure that they feel safe. So I'll get you to face this way. So again, hands around the elbows, fingers wrapped around, placing the elbows down, and then you can find your interlacing of the fingers either with that pinky tucked in or on the bottom, and then placing the top of the head inside the hands, straightening the legs as if you're walking through a dolphin, and just walking bit by bit, getting the hips as high over as you can, and then you can maybe bend one knee and then the other, and then just cueing straight up to the ceiling. So you can go heels up or you can go toes up to the ceiling. So I might tap her belly a little bit to tell her to tuck her belly in a little bit more. But it's looking quite good. See, the hips are stacked over the shoulders. There's not too much of a back bend. And making sure that our elbows are pressing down, so you can tuck your knees in to come back. Good. And then see if you can transition out nice and slowly. Awesome, thank you, Kate. And the other piece is that you maybe want to have 20%, 30% max of your weight on your actual head. Most of the weight is actually in the elbow. So don't think that the shoulders are just relaxed. We want to be active through the shoulders, pressing down so we don't have much pressure. Even though it is called a headstand, there's not much pressure on the head at all. It's actually just part of the structure with most of it going in through the elbows. And that's why we don't want the elbows out too much, because you can even practice if you were going to push something with the elbows in. So push something, imagine a heavy couch. If we pressed it with the elbows in line or in a little bit, you would get much more ease of force. But as soon as the elbows are out, we lose that force. So one, we don't want to overuse energy we don't need to, and also we don't want to put undue pressure on the shoulders while we're focusing on other things.